Looking at another football season done and dusted. Well, for the most part, we have a couple of sort of not so important games, if I can call them, still to be played.
Yeah.
But let's run through a couple of the leagues. I'm sure you've got some thoughts in terms of how some of those leagues actually played out. And let's start off with the English Premier League. Man City, 98 points from 38 games. Not quite the season they had last season. Not setting any records like they set last season.
like they did last season.
I think those records are going to be hard to be beaten for a long time to come. But is this the start of a Manchester City era?
Yeah, I mean, I see what's happening obviously with them in the Champions League, the financial fair play. I think, FIFA is obviously trying to level the playing fields, because what we're seeing at the moment is, complete domination in terms of domestic football for Manchester City, doing absolutely amazing. It's not really about how many points they accumulate. I mean, last year they got 100, now 98, too shy of that. But Liverpool pushed them right to the end. I think, for me, it was one of the most exciting Premier Leagues that, we've seen maybe ever. And Manchester City really just cleaning up. But we'll have to see next season. Other teams will strengthen. They will obviously strengthen again, hopefully FIFA doesn't, come up with too many restrictions in terms of how much money they can spend. I mean, they don't need too much. I think Vincent Kompany, for me, is that gap. Obviously, him leaving to Anderlecht, going to be a player-manager, interesting role he's decided to adopt. So I think for him and for Pep Guardiola, the gap is definitely going to be within the centre-back department. One or two additions to the squad as well, but looking forward to seeing what the other teams do. I mean, Arsenal at the moment, obviously in the Europa final. Chelsea obviously still in the Champions League for next season. So as much as Man City are the cream of the cream at the moment, I think other teams will strengthen as well.
So you still haven't answered the question. Do you think Man City era is upon us?
I think Man City, yes, still a couple of seasons. I think they will still dominate. I mean, the resources. I mean, it's sports at the end of the day. It's become such a financial business model at the moment, and with the resources that they have, similar to Sundowns. I mean, ultimately, the pocket dictates, and if they can keep spending the amount of money they can on players, why shouldn't they be at the top? They've got the best manager probably ever in world football. So I see Manchester City dominating, I think, for a long time to come.
Right, let's move on to the... I suppose I'll bring it in there because I think it's important, because it's the Scottish Premier League. Celtic, the only team that qualifies out of Scotland for the Champions League.
Wonder why, though. I mean, we do need to have a separate show just on that. I feel more clubs out of Scotland actually need to participate, and we need to see a variety. I mean, season in and season out, 90% of the teams in the Champions League are the same teams that we know, but I think UEFA need to look at adopting an approach where more teams out of, the likes of Scotland and so forth have more representation. I mean, we want to see a wider range of clubs within the tournament, so I think that's one thing to note. But good too.
But the big question is, are they strong enough? I mean,
but how are they ever going to get strong enough if they don't compete with the likes of your Juventuses and Real Madrids and those type of teams? We want to see more teams getting to that level, as opposed to just the cream of the crop always being the same, 4 or 5 teams that end up winning it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in the bigger scheme of things. But I still think that the Scottish Premier League is much, much weaker than the English Premier League.
Yeah,
I think to take them from a league that is much weaker than the English Premier League and push them into the Champions League, take someone like Hearts or Rangers is getting stronger, Aberdeen, Kilmarnock. I mean, you take some of those, they're going to get thrashed.
In the beginning, yes, 100% in the beginning, but let them build, I think, for me.
Would it not be sort of better in terms of building the league, bringing it more possibly into the English Premier League?
I'm not a fan of the Scottish League being integrated into the English League and having like Wales and all of them into one league. For me, not keep them separate, but where they can participate together like that.
Wales have a Premier League.
Where they can ultimately play together, I think bring them into the Champions League and let's have more. And let's see. I mean, look at Ajax this season. Yes, Ajax is a massive club in terms of football, but who would have expected they'd get to where they got to in this season's Champions League? So you could have surprises. It might not be overnight, but I think over time, some of the Scottish sides could surprise us and do well.
Yeah, good point. Let's move to La Liga. Barcelona, 87 points from 38 games. Almost a foregone conclusion. I think they wanted the 3 games to spare. Drew their last game. So not a great sort of end to the season for them. But I suppose when the title's already in the bag, you don't really.
It is what it is.
Want to sort of put the players through too much, because especially bearing in mind that you have Europe 2020 qualifiers coming up, and many of those top players, their seasons are not done yet.
Yeah, I think for me, Barcelona, it's the story of every season. I mean, for me, I judge them on the Champions League. I think domestically, 9 times out of 10, they're going to win the domestic trophy, except if Real Madrid has a fantastic season like they did under Zidane when they won. But for me, Barcelona are going to be judged on the Champions League. And unfortunately, there's just something missing. It's not the Pep Barcelona where minimum semi-finals. This Barcelona team psychologically are not able to get past the quarterfinal mark. And maybe the manager does need to look at himself, because the players are there at his disposal. He pretty much can sign anyone he wants. Coutinho came in, never had the greatest of seasons. Looks like Liverpool actually might want him back. Be interesting to see if that happens. But yeah, Barcelona might have to look at maybe replacing the manager, because for them, ultimately, they're judged on Champions League. And if they're not even getting at least to the semi-final for a club like Barcelona, it's just unacceptable. Especially this season, Mark. I mean, to be 3-0 up, at the stage that they're at, and to let it go. I mean, yes, Liverpool were fantastic, but you expect a 3-0 to go to Anfield. A side like Barcelona would be able to do it. So the mentality when they go away from home in the Champions League definitely needs to change.
Moving to Serie A, Juventus 90 points from 37 games. Still one game to be played this weekend. Now looking at the permutations, AC Milan could still make a Champions League spot. Yeah. At the expense of Atalanta and Inter Milan. I think.
Wow, what a season Atalanta have had. I mean, for them to be third at this particular stage. I mean, we're used to the Inter Milans, the AC Milan, Juventus being the top 2 and 3, but Atalanta to come from where they've come from to be third at this stage is absolutely amazing. So, yeah, big up to them and their manager as well.
Yeah, I mean, AC Milan playing Spal, so almost you got to say that that's 3 points in the bag. Yeah, it all just now depends on whether Atalanta and Inter can get their 3 points. I mean, wins for both of them means AC are out of Champions League. They play Europa, and the others are in.
Yeah, Gattuso playing in Europa. I mean, he played Europa last season. I think got knocked out by Arsenal. Still a quality side, maybe not the side they used to be when they had Inzaghi and Gattuso himself playing. But yeah, AC Milan doing well. But yeah, I think Juventus, just to touch on them a bit. Ultimately for them, another team that they're going to be judged on the Champions League. I mean, you would expect that they brought Ronaldo in for that. Unfortunately, not being able to do it against a very young Ajax side. So I guess that's football. I mean, look what happened domestically in South Africa as well. Big names, on paper might look the part, but ultimately it comes down to, the young players. I think young players now seem to be doing the business both domestically and abroad.
And I suppose the debate is going to rage eternally in terms of the Ronaldo versus Messi. I mean, Ronaldo now moving to Juve, winning in his first season there. I mean, this is now the umpteenth club that Ronaldo has moved to. And I mean, let's be honest, that Juve side packed with decent players. No superstars. Ronaldo was the superstar, is the superstar. Obviously, him being there sort of lifted the standard, in my opinion, in terms of the way Juve was playing.
Yeah, and the league, just like Serie A, Italian football, it's brought it back to light. I mean, now we're seeing it being shown on obviously pay TV and so forth. So it's definitely him single-handedly, besides the shirts that he sold, has brought the league back up to people actually wanting to watch it.
And obviously, I think Juve as well, during the Champions League campaign, doing very well right up to sort of where they got to, right close to the end.
I wonder if they will say they did well, though.
Yeah, I don't think so. But in my opinion, I don't think, one man doesn't, make a team at that level. Yes, he's got the record for the most goals at Champions League level, so we can never take that away from him. But I don't think at that level he had the kind of support that he needed.
Around him, players Correct. Around him, you mean?
Yeah. Correct. I think that team is still very young. Yeah. I think in a year or two's time, Juve would be very upset
if they didn't win,
to be going out in quarterfinal stages of the Champions League, because they've got the quality being built. Those youngsters are learning, They're going through this process beautifully.
Be interesting to see if they keep their players, though. I mean, I'm hearing Dybala might, be looking for a move, maybe to Man United. Who knows? Their coach Max Allegri is leaving.
Yeah.
I'm hearing Antonio Conte might be replacing him, and Ronaldo not being too happy with that. So I think if they can keep their squad and get a good manager, I think they'll do well. I mean, Conte obviously used to coach Italy. He was quite successful there. He's Italian himself. He knows the league. So it'll be interesting to see who they actually appoint, because Juventus should be challenging and winning the Champions League.
Right, let's move to Ligue 1, the French league. PSG 91 points from 37 games. Once again, one match there still to be played, but don't expect any changes for the Champions League spots and for the Europa League spots. It's a done deal there. So this is literally just a case of determining final low positions, particularly mid and bottom table. But I think for me, almost a waste of time league, if I can call it that. PSG ran away with it, absolutely dominated. And I think if we look at Champions League performances of the other French teams, it's there to be seen.
Yeah.
The other French teams are just not on the level of PSG.
100%. The investment. And I think I've mentioned it on the show before, that I think the reason why PSG struggle in the Champions League is because their league is not strong enough. I think if they were in another league, in an England, even in an Italy, I think they'll do better when it comes to Champions League. They're not used to that tough physicality, hectic competition week in and week out. They're winning 3-0, 4-1 every week. Players are bound to just slump down to that level. And then when they come to the Champions League, they just don't have it in them. Yes, in terms of ability, they have it. But in terms of mentality and that pressure, when it counts, unfortunately, they just don't have it.
And I think if they have to do a solid sort of wrap-up of their season, finishing top of the league, 91 points, from their 37 games so far, possibly finishing off on 94, and looking at their Champions League performance and looking at the side that knocked them out and seeing where they finished.
Really.
We're looking at the top of the Pops team being knocked out, but badly knocked out, by a team that finished in 6th position in the English Premier League. And there were some great performances, but most certainly not the Manchester United of old, most certainly not the dominant club that Manchester United
had. A manager with no experience,
100%.
basically, yeah.
And to lose in the way that they lost in that fashion, and to drop out of the Champions League that way, I think mentally, it's a long road, I think, for PSG still to go. Yeah,
signing players is not everything. Ultimately it's about the team, it's about players wanting to be there, and not just about big wages that we know they're on. And maybe the instability of, Neymar, Mbappe, maybe on huge wages, and maybe some of the players aren't. And maybe when it comes down to the Champions League, they may be disgruntled within the changing room. But things definitely have to change, because for all that investment that they're making in the club, if they don't win the Champions League, I think the owners will be bitterly disappointed.
You think Neymar and Mbappe stay?
I think one of them would leave. I just don't know who it will be at this stage. But for me, one of them will probably leave.
Rumours already that Mbappe wants to go, wants to stay. Let's wait and see.
I wonder where would be the right fit for him. I mean, I'm thinking Madrid, with the French connection, Zidane obviously being back there. I think that could work. I mean, if they get Hazard and Mbappe, jeez, could you imagine what a combination that would be?
Absolutely. Maybe push Madrid back up to...
maybe a swap for Bale. I mean, Bale looks unhappy there. His last game didn't seem to be too happy. I think got substituted.
Yeah.
So, interesting times.
Right, let's look at the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich winning it on the last day, needing that win.
4 points, I think it was.
Yeah.
4 points, yeah.
78 points from 34 games. But literally down to the wire. It was them versus
Dortmund. I think Dortmund. Red Bull Leipzig came third, I think.
Correct. So down to the wire kind of stuff, but well done, Bayern Munich. Interesting comments coming out of the likes of Frank Ribery and Ian Robben.
I think they both retired, if I'm not mistaken, or left.
Leaving.
Yeah, leaving. Okay.
But both talking about the fact that the German Bundesliga is no longer what it used to be.
100%. I mean, it just shows in the level of competition between the clubs. Yes, Klopp, when Klopp was there, he did absolutely fantastic. But in the Champions League, we're used to seeing German sides do absolutely well. But doesn't this then speak to also the national team? I mean, look how horrific they did in the World Cup. And that's trickling now towards the domestic league. So I think there is a correlation between what happens with your national side and what happens in domestic football. I mean, Manchester City flying, look at what's happening in the Champions League with English teams. Domestically, they're doing well. So I think definitely what happens with your national side and what happens domestically makes a huge difference.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about some of the other big matches still left over. And then finally, looking a little bit closer to home, PSL, Mamelodi Sundowns, 59 points from 30
I predicted
games.
it. Mark, where's my lunch?
You did. Buy your lunch.
I said, Sundowns, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I think, one of the best seasons from a PSL perspective. And I think you have to give kudos to Orlando Pirates. I mean, to be 2 points behind. I mean, Pirates fans will be kicking themselves. They actually should have won the league. That 2-2 draw against Cape Town City right towards the end didn't do them any justice at all. And then on the last game, I mean, walloping Polokwane City. So it was in their hands. I think Pito, 2 games before, had actually conceded that, look, let the league go where it's meant to go, alluding that, look, it's in Pirates' hands, he can do nothing about it. But hey, Benny McCarthy gave him a gift, and Sundowns took it. So ultimately, you have to take your opportunities when they come and collect the points. And, you know, Mamelodi Sundowns were able to do that. I think for them, it would have been very unfortunate if they didn't win any silverware this season, obviously being knocked out in the semi-final in CAF, but they redeemed themselves and lifted it back to back, which is not easy. So we saw Pep do it and we saw Pito do it, and everyone's now saying, can Pito be the Sir Alex Ferguson of South African football, stay for 10, 15, 20 years? I guess he's still a young man. I think time will tell.
Well, it depends what Baxter does, because they might then just knee-jerk into bringing Pizzo back.
Interesting, and maybe Baxter should go to Chiefs. I think with what's happening at Chiefs...
wow, TS Galaxy. That's going to be nightmare stuff for a long time to come.
That's my story of the season with regards to domestic football. I mean, for them to win that, but Mark, you have to look at the way they've played this season. And, you know, I think how they played domestically, especially with Nedbank Cup. I mean, they're sitting 8th in the NFD. Difficult league to win, but Kaizer Chiefs were just not able to handle them. And if you look at the average age of the players, they were just outran on the field by youngsters, you know. I mean, we're seeing it with Ajax, we're seeing it with TS Galaxy, that youngsters, momentum. I mean, I thought second half experience would come to bite them and Kaizer Chiefs would just have that experience, but Manyama and Katande, the old legs at Kaizer Chiefs. And I mean, to think of Kaizer Chiefs giving Bernard Parker another year extension on his contract is like, how do you do that when...
He was a nobody this year.
Exactly. He did all right in the Nedbank Cup, leading them up to this stage. I think he was even nominated for Player of the Year for Nedbank Cup, but youngsters just were too much for Kaizer Chiefs.
Right, so leagues are done, so to say. Like we said, 2 games still to be played across 2 leagues. So what's left? We've got the Scottish Cup final taking place this weekend. It's Hearts versus Celtic. So will Celtic get the double?
Probably.
That's the big question. And the other big 2, Europa League final.
On that, Mkhitaryan is not going to be playing in the final. I think it's religious reasons. I think they're playing in Baku, and you know there's political instability in that country. So Mkhitaryan has actually opted out of that game, which is a huge blow from an Arsenal perspective. I mean, he probably wouldn't have started the game, but I assume he would have come on as a sub. So just news breaking in today that Mkhitaryan won't be available for that game.
Yeah, so Arsenal versus Chelsea, that's on the 29th. And then just a few days later, Champions League final, Liverpool versus Tottenham. But the big point that I want to make is you were talking earlier about league performance and what's taking place in the league and how that's filtering up, obviously and down, into the national setups. And if we look at this, Europa final, Arsenal versus Chelsea, English Premier League side versus English Premier League side, and guess what? These guys finished 3rd and 4th respectively in the league. And then you're looking at
4th and 5th.
4th and 5th, sorry. And then you're looking at Champions League with 3rd and 2nd. Okay, in the Champions League, England versus England.
Yeah.
Again.
Absolutely incredible. Never been done ever in the history.
Never. So you're talking, it's England versus England across Europa and Champions League over the next couple of days. An English team is going to walk away with everything.
Yeah.
All right. But yet, the national side struggles to do well in the big competitions.
I'll disagree. I mean, they got to the semi-final of the World Cup. I mean, that's not happened for England in ages.
With arguably the best English team ever put together since 1966.
I don't agree. I think the 2010 England team is a much better team than this team. I think this one was just more youthful. They were more organized, but player to player, And if I was to look at both squads, I think the 2010 team with Beckham, Scholes, Gerrard, Giggs, not Giggs, sorry, the Neville brothers, I think that squad for me was a better squad than this one. 10 love. I think it's not even up for debate. For me, the 2010 squad it was Ashley Cole.
No, on paper, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the experience that was on, but you look at Beckham coming in with that injury, hadn't spent much time with the squad at all.
Rooney.
You're looking at the old guard of Manchester United, which was the spine of that English team. All old guard players. So on paper, absolutely, you'd have to say that 2010 team was the best.
Yeah.
But if we look at what these youngsters had accomplished
in
terms
of
respective clubs, coming from relative nobodies to where they were and the positions they were holding in their clubs, you've got to argue that this, other than the experience on paper, was the best English side ever assembled since 1966.
Okay, noted. Yeah, I think if you put it that way, I would have to agree with you. Yeah.
So wait and see.
Yeah,
we've
we'll wait
got
and see.
European 2020s coming up, and then after that, it's build up to the next World Cup. Can England walk away with that 2020 trophy? That would be very, very interesting. It would show that all of this work that's taken place 2018-2019 season is now going to be filtering up, as long as Mr. Southgate selects the best of the best.
I still don't think England will win a World Cup anytime soon.
No, I fully agree with you.
No, I think what happened, that this was their time for me to win a World Cup. I don't think that'll happen again. I just don't think they'll be able to repeat that. I think other nations are stronger, they'll get stronger, and England's opportunity was this previous World Cup. Just before you move to the next, so there's a spanner in the works with regards to this Champions League and everything. So there's a possibility that Manchester City might, because of financial fair play, they might be eliminated from next season's Champions League. And I'm not 100% sure, but doesn't this mean that if Arsenal win Europa League, it opens up another spot for Champions League, which would then be Man United, who finish sixth?
Correct.
But is that 100% confirmed that would happen?
No, it's a permutation.
Okay.
And it's all subject to what happens with Man City.
Yeah, but I'm saying if Man City are out, will it automatically mean if Arsenal win, not Chelsea, if Arsenal win,
honestly, I don't know. I'll have to go and look into that.
Okay. I think it's worth us
We'll investigate that,
investigating.
and we'll come back to you on the next show.